Next, we're going to touch on blend modes, and blend modes are where you can really start to take your layers to another level because they just let you do things that you can't do without layers. Okay, think of blend modes almost as opacity on steroids, all right? There's a lot of things you can do with opacity, but even more when it comes to blend modes. So we're going to demonstrate with an image here. It can be any image. I'm just going to use this one, but you don't have to follow along with this one. And I'm going to create a new blank layer on top of it. I'm going to go select my gradient tool from the toolbox, and up in the options bar here, I'm just going to pick that default black to white gradient. Okay? And then once I do that, I'm going to drag over from the left all the way to the right, and I create a pretty even black to white gradient here, where we have black on the left, we have middle gray, a 50% gray in the middle, and then we have all white on the right-hand side. Now, if you take a look in the top left corner here, you'll see that the blend mode is automatically set to normal. All right, that means there's no blending happening with this layer, but there's a whole lot of blend modes underneath it. We're not going to go through every single one. Honestly, folks, there's only like 3 or 4 of them that you're going to find that you use a lot. So I don't go over every single one because honestly, I just don't use them. All right, so I'm going to show you the ones that I teach with and that I see people use a lot. So the first thing to kind of understand here is if I drop the opacity, can I blend these 2 layers together? Yeah. It looks like I'm blending them too. I'm taking part of the top one, dropping the opacity, and I can see the bottom one. But this is kind of like an all or nothing. I'm not selectively blending. I'm seeing 80% throughout the entire layer. Well, where blend modes come in is if I change this from normal to, say, the first one we're going to look at, which is multiply, watch what happens. See how multiply dropped out the white and it kept the black, and it made everything in between darker. All right, let's turn this layer on and off. That's before, and that's after. So what multiply does is multiply ignores any white. It drops it out, and it lets you see the layer that's underneath it. And then anything that was on that layer to the left of that, or that wasn't white, it's going to make it appear as if the image looks darker in all those places where they blend together. Okay, it's almost kind of like the effect of taking 2 slides and putting 2 slides on top of each other. If you've ever experimented with that, it's almost like the multiply effect. Now, and multiply is always going to have a darker effect. In fact, anything in this part of the layer blend mode area is going to be a darkening blend mode. Okay, but multiply is the one you'll use the most. Now, we go to multiply, we go down to screen. Screen is the opposite of multiply. So before I even get there, kind of think to yourself, all right, so if multiply dropped out the white and made everything else darker, what's screen going to do? Screen is going to drop out the black, and it's going to make everything else that it blends appear brighter or lighter. So it's the exact opposite of multiply. So where multiply got rid of white, screen gets rid of black. Take a look at the before and after, and you can see what happens. Now the next one that we're going to look at here, and by the way, all these in this section here, these tend to be lightening blend modes. Okay. Now the next one we're going to look here is really, it's half and half, overlay and soft light. So I'm going to go with soft light first. Here's what soft light does. Take a look at before and after. That's before, that's after. What's it doing here? Well, we had white over here on the right-hand side of the image. We had black over here on this side of the image. If you look at these areas, it's taking the white areas and it's making them whiter or brighter over here. It's taking the darks and making them darker over here. What is that really? It's kind of like contrast. That's kind of, in essence, what contrast is doing. All right? It's taking the whites, making them whiter, taking the blacks, making them blacker. Well, that's what soft light does. And what's it do in the middle? Let me turn this on and off. Look at the middle. Pay attention right around here. Okay? See what it's doing in the middle? Absolutely nothing. It's not changing anything because what soft light does is it takes 50% gray and it's basically like it's deleting it. It's making it, it's taking its opacity all the way down. You'll see straight through it as if nothing was ever there. And that's what it's doing with 50% gray, which is right in the middle here. Now, soft light's a very popular one, but another popular one is overlay. Overlay does the same thing as soft light, but it's just a little bit more, and the best word I can think of is punchy. So watch overlay. See that? See the difference? It's still brightening this part. It's still darkening this part. It's just more intense. It's a little bit punchy is kind of the word that I use for it. But take a look at the middle. A little bit harder to concentrate on this one because the change is pretty extreme. But just keep an eye right around here. Okay? I'm going to turn it back on, off, and back on. All right? So it is leaving 50% gray alone as if it were never there. It's dropping it out totally. So that's kind of an introduction. Now let me show you one more trick with blend modes where this happens a lot. I'm going to open up the other image for this lesson here. Let's go over here to Bridge and open up lesson 8B. Take a look. We have this black and white logo. So a lot of times somebody may give you a logo and they don't give you the source file. They don't give you anything. They just give you this black and white image. And when you take it, and I'm just going to select all, copy, move over to this image here and paste it in, and it's too big. So let's go up here to Free Transform. And let's make this guy smaller. I'm going to put it up here in the top left corner. And instead of trying to grab a selection tool and select all the white out and delete it, think about blend modes. What's a blend mode do? Well, which one dropped out white and kept black? Multiply. So if I click on multiply, what happens? I get rid of all the white, and now I just have the black part of the logo, which is what I want, and I can move it over everything and notice how the two blend together. That's hence blend modes. All right, you can see how it interacts with each other. Okay, now the opposite could also happen. Maybe I want to keep the white and drop out the black. Well, what was the opposite of multiply? Screen. So see what happens here? Now we keep all the white. Now the black basically drops out and we can see through it. No matter where we move it on this layer, Photoshop is going to continually blend this layer and the layer below it based on whatever blend mode you chose from this list up here. And I'll leave it with a couple of thoughts. The first one is, if you're the super duper study type that likes to know all the technical details, if you go to your help file over here inside of Photoshop and you search for blend modes, you'll get a list of every single blend mode in this list, and you will get an extremely technical definition of what they do. But if you find yourself interested in that, it's definitely worth a look just to see what some of them do and get an idea of how they're described. The other thing is, there's keyboard shortcuts for these things, and it might seem small, but trust me, it's big. It saves you a lot of time because you're going to start using blend modes a lot. So the keyboard shortcut, it's a little bit difficult at first, but when you start using it, it's going to speed things up. It's the Option and Shift keys on the Mac or the Alt and Shift keys on the PC. So hold down those two keys, Option Shift or Alt Shift, and then try hitting the first letter of the blend mode that you want to use. So for M, I would hit N, or so for multiply, I would hit M, and it changes it to multiply. For screen, I would hit S, and it changes it to screen. For overlay, I'd hit O, and it changes it to overlay. Okay, and then for soft light, it's a little bit more difficult. You got to start going down the letters in the word. S is already taken by screen. O was already taken by overlay. So for soft light, it's F. So think of it as FT light. All right, so if I hit F for soft light, it'll change it to that blend mode. So that one's a little bit weird, but really for most of them, it's the first letter of the word. So you can remember that. So just remember Option Shift on Mac or Alt Shift on the PC, and then hit the first letter of the blend mode for the keyboard shortcut.